The Girl Who Would Be Morgan, Part 1. The arrival come close, and let me tell you about the girl who would become legend. About the child who arrived at Avalon wild with grief, and left as Morgan le Fay. About the year that shaped a sorceress, and broke a little girl's heart in ways that never fully healed. This is a story about before. About the time when Morgan was just Morgan. 9 years old, and newly orphaned. About the first year on the Sacred Isle when she learned magic and made her first friend, and discovered that power always comes with prices you don't expect to pay. Her mother died on a gray morning in autumn, when the leaves were turning, and the world smelled of smoke, and ending. Things a grain queen, mother, gone in the night from a fever that came fast and burned through her like wildfire, leaving nothing but a cooling body and a daughter who couldn't quite believe that the woman who'd sung her to sleep every night was simply not there anymore, would never be there again. Had left without warning or goodbye, or any chance for Morgan to say the things children always think they'll have time to say later. The castle filled with mourning and ritual, with priests chanting Latin, and servants weeping, and courtiers wearing black, and speaking in hushed voices about God's will and heaven's gain, and all the comfortable lies adults tell themselves when death comes too soon and makes no sense. But Morgan didn't weep, couldn't weep. Just stood frozen and silent beside her mother's body, staring at the face that looked like her mother but wasn't. That lacked the essential spark that made Morgaine herself. That was just empty shell wearing familiar features. Her half-brother Arthur came to the funeral. The boy king, who was barely older than a child himself, wearing his crown like it weighed more than he could bear, surrounded by advisors and guards, and the weight of a kingdom that needed him to be stronger and wiser than any 15-year-old should have to be. He knelt beside Morgan and tried to offer comfort, tried to be the big brother despite the years they'd spent apart, despite barely knowing each other. "You'll come to Camelot. You'll live with me. I'll take care of you. You're my sister, your family." His voice was kind, but Morgan heard the uncertainty in it. Heard that he didn't know what to do with a grieving 9-year-old any more than she knew what to do with a brother who was also a king, who was also a stranger, who was also drowning in his own responsibilities and couldn't possibly have room for her pain on top of everything else he carried. But someone else spoke before Morgan could respond, before Arthur's offer could become reality. A woman's voice, clear and commanding, coming from the back of the hall, where shadows gathered thick. "The girl comes to Avalon. Her mother wished it. I will train her in the ways Morgaine would have taught her if she'd lived. In the old knowledge, in the magic that runs in our bloodline. She will be priestess as her mother would have been before crown and marriage changed her path." Arthur turned and his face went carefully neutral. The expression Morgan would learn to recognize as the one he wore when dealing with something that made him uncomfortable, but that he couldn't simply refuse or dismiss. Morgan le Fay. The woman stepped into the light, and Morgan saw her clearly for the first time. Not old, but not young either, with dark hair and gray eyes and presence that filled the room despite her simple robes. With power that pressed against the walls like something alive and aware, and barely contained. She was beautiful in a way that made Morgan think of winter storms and deep forests and things that were dangerous and wild and completely undomesticated. Arthur's voice was careful, diplomatic, the voice of someone walking through a conversation full of traps. "Morgan is my sister. She should be raised at court, given education suitable for her station, prepared for the life she lead as princess of the realm." Morgan's smile was sharp. "Morgaine asked me to take the girl if anything happened to her. Asked me years ago, when Morgan was born, and showed signs of the gift, of the power that runs through our blood. Your mother knew what the child was. what she could become, knew that Camelot, with its priests and politics, was no place for someone whose magic would only grow stronger with age. She made me promise, and I keep my promises, Arthur, even when they're inconvenient, even when they complicate your plans for tidy kingdoms and unified rule. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste a clash of wills between king and sorceress playing out in careful words and careful silences. Morgan watched them and felt like she was prize being disputed, like object rather than person. Like her own feelings and desires mattered less than whatever power struggle was happening between these two people, who both claimed to want what was best for her but who clearly wanted very different things. Arthur's jaw tightened. She's 9 years old. She's grieving. This isn't the time to make decisions about her future. She needs stability, family, comfort. Morgan's voice softened slightly, but lost none of its certainty. She needs magic. She needs training. She needs to learn what she is before the power inside her grows beyond her control and destroys her. I've seen it happen, Arthur. Seen children with the gift tear themselves apart because no one taught them how to channel it, how to shape it, how to make it serve them rather than consuming them. Do you want that for your sister? Do you want her to wake one night with her room on fire because her nightmares manifested? Do you want her to accidentally hurt people she loves because she doesn't understand the power moving through her blood? Morgan's hands clenched into fists because she didn't understand what they were talking about. Didn't know what gift or power or magic they meant. Didn't know why her mother had apparently planned to send her away, had kept secrets, had made arrangements for a future Morgan hadn't known existed. She wanted to scream at both of them, wanted to demand they stop talking about her like she wasn't there. Wanted to tell them she didn't want Camelot or Avalon, didn't want training or stability, just wanted her mother back. Wanted to wake up and discover this was nightmare rather than reality. Wanted everything to go back to how it was before, fever and death and strangers arguing over her future. But her voice wouldn't work, wouldn't cooperate. Stayed locked in her throat along with the tears that wouldn't fall. Along with the grief that felt too large to express, along with everything she wanted to say but couldn't. Arthur looked at Morgan and she saw something like pain cross his face, saw him recognize her silence as the scream it was, saw him understand he was losing this argument not because Morgan was right, but because he couldn't give Morgan what she needed, couldn't be family and king simultaneously. Couldn't offer her the attention and care she deserved when he had a kingdom to hold. Together and enemies to manage and responsibilities that never stopped demanding his attention. 1 year, his voice was firm, decisive, the voice of someone making a ruling rather than a request. Morgan goes to Avalon for 1 year. If she thrives there, if she wants to stay, if she truly has this gift you claim, then she continues her training. But if she's unhappy, if she wants to come home, if Avalon isn't right for her, she comes to Camelot and I'll see she's raised properly and given every advantage. 1 year. Morgan considered this, head tilted slightly, eyes calculating something Morgan couldn't read. 1 year, agreed. But when the year is done and she chooses to stay, because she will choose it, Arthur, you don't interfere. You don't try to reclaim her. You let her become what she's meant to be. The agreement was sealed with looks rather than words, with the weight of magic and authority pressing against each other until they found equilibrium, until both sides accepted terms they didn't love but could live with. And Morgan stood silent through all of it, stood frozen and furious and grieving. Stood being decided for rather than deciding, stood learning the first lesson of power, which was that adults would always claim to know what was best, while actually serving their own interests, their own needs, their own desire to control and shape and determine outcomes. Arthur left shortly after, taking his court and his guards and his heavy crown with him, leaving Morgaine with a kiss to the forehead and a promise that if she needed him, he would come. That she was his sister, always regardless of where she lived or who trained her. The promise was meant to comfort but felt hollow. Felt like something said because it should be said, rather than because it meant anything substantial or real. Morgaine waited until everyone else had left, until it was just the two of them in the hall that smelled of incense and grief, until Morgaine's silent rage had nowhere to hide. You're angry. Good anger is useful. Anger means you're alive. You're feeling. You're not giving up. Hold on to that. Channel it. Let it fuel you rather than consuming you. But Morgaine's voice, when it finally worked, came out as hiss rather than words. Came out as all the fury she'd been holding back. I don't want to go with you. I don't want Avalon. I don't want magic or training or any of it. I just want my mother. I want to go back to yesterday. I want this to not be real. Morgaine's expression didn't soften, didn't offer false comfort or empty reassurance. I know. But yesterday is gone and your mother is dead, and what you want doesn't change what is. You can spend your life wishing things were different, or you can accept what's real and learn to shape it, to work with it, to make it serve you. The world is cruel and unfair, and it doesn't care about a 9-year-old's grief. But magic, power, knowledge, those things give you tools to fight back, to protect yourself, to ensure you're never helpless again. Morgaine wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her. The days of not sleeping and not eating and not crying finally demanding their price. She swayed slightly, and Morgaine caught her elbow, steadied her with surprising gentleness. Come, you'll sleep tonight in your mother's chambers. Tomorrow, we leave for Avalon. Tomorrow your new life begins, whether you want it or not. She led Morgaine up the stairs to the rooms that had been Morgaine's, helped her into bed still wearing her black dress because neither of them had energy for anything more complicated. Morgaine sat beside the bed like a guard or a warden, or perhaps something closer to comfort than Morgaine wanted to admit. Your mother loved you. Whatever else you think, whatever anger you carry, know that. She loved you enough to see what you'd need, to make arrangements for your future, to ensure you'd be trained by someone who understood the gift rather than feared it. That's love. Imperfect, complicated, sometimes looking like abandonment when it's actually protection, but love nonetheless. Morgaine turned her face to the wall, refusing to acknowledge the words even though they settled into her chest like stones, heavy and cold and impossible to ignore. She closed her eyes and tried to will herself into sleep, into oblivion, into anything that wasn't this moment, this grief, this future she didn't want rushing toward her like a wave she couldn't escape. Behind her closed lids, she saw her mother's face, heard her voice singing lullabies, felt the gentle hands that had soothed childhood fears and healed childhood hurts, and she made a silent promise to the darkness, to the grief, to herself. She would go to Avalon because she had no choice. She would learn what they tried to teach her, because refusing would give them satisfaction she wouldn't grant. But she wouldn't forgive, wouldn't accept, wouldn't let them pretend this was anything but kidnapping dressed up as education, abandonment dressed up as protection, loss dressed up as opportunity. She would survive this year, and then she would leave, and she would never, ever let anyone have power over her life again. It was the promise of a grieving child who didn't understand that some promises are impossible to keep, that some paths can't be walked backward once you've started down them, that becoming Morgan le Fay meant leaving Morgaine behind in ways she couldn't yet imagine, couldn't yet comprehend, couldn't yet see coming until it was far too late to change course. The Girl Who Would Be Morgaine, Part 2, The Island They Left Before Dawn. Morgan and Morgaine, traveling alone through morning mist that grew thicker the farther they walked from the castle, that seemed to rise from the ground itself rather than settling from sky, that moved with purpose rather than wind. Morgaine carried a small bag with her few possessions, the black dress she wore and one spare, a wooden horse her mother had given her years ago that she couldn't bear to leave behind, even though she felt too old for toys. Too old for the childhood that had ended the moment fever took her mother and left her orphaned and alone. She walked in silence, refusing to speak to Morgaine, refusing to acknowledge the woman who'd stolen her from everything familiar, even though Morgaine knew, in the part of her that wasn't consumed by grief and rage, that Morgaine hadn't stolen her any more than Arthur had abandoned her. That adults had made decisions they thought were right, and Morgaine was simply caught in the consequences of those choices, whether she wanted to be or not. The lake appeared suddenly, as if the mist had been hiding it, as if they'd crossed some invisible boundary between ordinary world and something else, something stranger and older, and governed by rules Morgaine didn't understand. The water was perfectly still, mirror smooth, reflecting sky and trees, and the pale light of dawn in ways that seemed more real than the actual sky and trees surrounding them. A boat waited at the shore, simple wooden craft with no oars or sail or any obvious means of moving through water. But Morgaine stepped into it like she expected it to work, and after a moment of hesitation, Morgaine followed because what else could she do? Where else could she go? Who else did she have now that her mother was gone and her brother was king and there was no one left who put her first? Who considered her needs above their own plans and purposes and political calculations? The boat moved without anyone touching it, gliding across water so still it felt like floating through air, like drifting between worlds, like leaving behind everything solid and real, for something that existed only in stories and dreams and the kind of impossible places children imagine, but adults insist don't exist. The mist closed around them and Morgaine felt it pressing against her skin, cold and damp and somehow aware, somehow watching, somehow testing her to see if she belonged here or if she was an intruder who should be rejected, expelled, sent back to the ordinary world where she could live an ordinary life and never have to think about magic or power or the gift that apparently ran in her blood, whether she wanted it or not. She closed her eyes and tried to pretend she was somewhere else. Tried to imagine herself back in her mother's rooms being sung to sleep. Tried to make this not be happening through sheer force of will and desperate denial. But when she opened her eyes again, they were approaching an island that shouldn't exist, that couldn't exist, that violated everything she'd been taught about how the world worked and what was possible within it. Avalon, the sacred isle that existed between the mortal realm and the realm of spirit, that was both place and idea, both physical and metaphorical, both real and impossible simultaneously. She saw standing stones older than memory, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly, that seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of her eye, that suggested meanings she couldn't quite grasp but felt pressing against the edges of her understanding. She saw apple trees in full bloom, despite autumn reigning everywhere else, their branches heavy with fruit that glowed faintly even in daylight, that pulsed with soft light, suggesting they were more than simple fruit, more than natural growth, more than anything that followed ordinary rules about seasons and harvest and what was possible for trees to be. She saw buildings of stone and thatch that seemed to have grown from the ground rather than been built. that looked like they'd been there forever and would be there forevermore, regardless of what happened to the mortal world beyond the mists. And she saw women, perhaps 24, ranging in age from barely older than Morgan to ancient beyond counting, all wearing robes of different colors that seemed to indicate rank or specialty or purpose she didn't understand. They stood at the shore waiting, faces curious and solemn, watching the boat approach with expressions that mixed welcome and assessment, that evaluated whether this new arrival would be worthy of their time and training, or whether she'd prove disappointing, inadequate, unable to meet the standards required of those who studied the old ways and learned to channel power that most mortals never even glimpsed. The boat grounded on shore and Morgan stepped out with fluid grace, completely at home, completely certain of her place and purpose and right to be here. Morgan followed more slowly, more carefully, feeling like intruder despite the invitation, feeling like she was trespassing on sacred ground where she didn't belong, where she'd never belong no matter how long she stayed or how hard she tried. The women gathered closer and Morgan's voice carried clear authority despite not being raised. "This is Morgan Agraine's daughter, my niece. She has the gift, raw and untrained, strong enough that it will destroy her if we don't teach her to control it. She's here for a year by agreement with her half-brother Arthur. She's grieving, she's angry, she doesn't want to be here. All of that is normal and expected and we'll work with it, rather than trying to force it out of her. She needs time and patience and firm boundaries. She needs to learn that magic demands discipline, that power requires responsibility, that the gift is both blessing and burden." One of the younger women, perhaps 20 with red hair and green eyes and a smile that looked genuine rather than forced, stepped forward. "I'm Nesta. I'll be your guide while you adjust, your friend if you let me, your teacher for some of the basic lessons. I remember what it's like to arrive here confused and frightened and not understanding what's happening or why. I'll help you find your way." Morgan wanted to snap that she didn't need help, didn't want friends, didn't want any of this. But something in Nesta's face stopped her. Some quality of understanding that suggested she really did remember being new and lost and angry at circumstances beyond her control. So instead of the sharp refusal she'd planned, Morgan just nodded once, stiff and reluctant, accepting without embracing, acknowledging without agreeing. Morgan led her to a small building near the center of the compound. Simple stone structure with one room containing a bed and a chest and a table and chair and nothing else. Nothing decorative or comfortable or designed to make this feel like home rather than cell. "This is yours. You'll sleep here, study here, keep your possessions here. It's not much, but it's more than most novices receive. You're here because of who your mother was, because of who I am, because of the gift you carry. That brings certain privileges but also certain expectations. You'll be held to higher standards than others. You'll be pushed harder. You'll be forgiven less. That's not cruelty. That's necessity. If you're going to carry the kind of power that runs in our bloodline, you need to learn perfect control, perfect discipline, perfect understanding of what you're capable of and what the consequences would be if you ever lost that control." Morgan set down her bag and turned to face Morgan with all the fury she'd been holding back since her mother died. Since this woman had claimed her, since her life had been decided by people who'd never asked what she wanted. "I don't want this. I don't want to be here. I don't want power or magic or any of it. I just want my mother and she's dead and nothing you teach me will change that. Nothing you do will make this better. Nothing about any of this will ever be anything but you people. Stealing my life because you think you know what's best for me, when really you just want to shape me into whatever serves your purposes." Morgan's expression didn't change, didn't soften, didn't show surprise or hurt or any reaction to the words that Morgan had intended to wound, had hoped would penetrate the woman's infuriating calm. "I know. Everything you said is true. We are shaping you to serve our purposes. We do think we know what's best, and your mother is dead, and nothing will change that. But here's what's also true. You have power. Real power. The kind that will manifest whether you want it to or not, whether you're trained or not, whether you understand it or not. Would you rather learn to control it, or would you rather wake one night to find you've burned down whatever building you're sleeping in because your nightmares called fire? Would you rather understand what you can do? Or would you rather hurt people you care about because you didn't know your emotions could reach out and affect the world around you?" The questions landed like blows because they carried weight of truth that Morgan couldn't dismiss no matter how angry she was, couldn't ignore, no matter how much she wanted to. She thought about the times things had happened around her that she couldn't explain. The times her mother's candles had flickered when Morgan was upset. The times objects had moved slightly when she'd been angry. The times she'd known things she shouldn't have known, had felt things she shouldn't have felt, had sensed presences and possibilities that no one else seemed to notice. She'd always dismissed those moments as imagination or coincidence or mistakes of perception. But what if they weren't? What if Morgan was right, and there was something inside her that needed training, needed discipline, needed to be understood and controlled before it did damage she couldn't repair? She sat on the bed, and it was harder than anything she'd ever slept on. Unforgiving and uncomfortable and completely unlike the soft mattress in her mother's castle. Unlike anything designed for comfort or care or the acknowledgement that children deserved gentleness. "This is where I have to stay. This is my home now." Morgan nodded. "For a year at least. Maybe longer if you choose it. Time moves differently here. The year might feel shorter or longer than you expect. Days might blur together or stretch endlessly. That's part of being in a place between worlds, part of existing somewhere that doesn't follow ordinary rules about time and space and causation. You'll adjust. Humans are remarkably adaptable when they have to be. And you'll have to be, because going back isn't an option until the year is done. Until you've learned what you need to learn. Until I'm satisfied you won't accidentally destroy yourself or others through ignorance of what you are." Nesta appeared in the doorway carrying a bundle. "Clean robes. You'll wear these instead of your black dress. Not because we don't honor your grief, but because the clothing you wear affects how you move, how you think, how you perceive yourself. Priestess robes will help you step into the role. Will remind you that you're here to learn, will mark you as part of this community, rather than visitor or prisoner. The color is gray for novices. As you advance, you'll earn different colors, different symbols, different marks of rank and achievement. But everyone starts in gray. Everyone begins at the beginning, regardless of who their family was or what gifts they might carry." Morgan took the robes, and they were soft, much softer than she'd expected, woven from wool so fine it felt almost like silk, dyed a gray that somehow managed to be both neutral and beautiful, both simple and elegant. She looked at Morgan with suspicion. "You said I'd be held to higher standards. You said I'd get no special treatment. But I get my own room and fine robes, and you're making exceptions already. How is that not special treatment?" Morgan's smile was sharp and approving. "Good. You're paying attention. You're questioning. That's the first lesson. Never accept what you're told without examining it. Never trust that adults have your best interests at heart just because they claim to. Yes, you get a private room. But that's not privilege. That's isolation. Other novices sleep together, form bonds, support each other, have community. You'll be alone. You'll have to work harder to find connection, to build relationships, to feel like you belong. Yes, you get fine robes. But that's not kindness. That's expectation. Everyone who sees you will know you're Igraine's daughter, Morgan's niece, someone from whom great things are expected. You'll be judged more harshly. You'll be watched more carefully. Every mistake will be magnified. Every failure will be noted. So yes, you get certain things that look like privileges, but they're actually weights designed to test whether you'll crumble or whether you'll rise to meet expectations that would break most children your age. The honesty was brutal, but somehow Morgaine preferred it to false kindness. Preferred knowing the truth even when the truth was harsh over being coddled with comfortable lies. She held the robes and looked at this woman who was aunt and teacher and jailer and protector all tangled together. What happens if I fail? What happens if I can't meet your standards, or learn what you're trying to teach, or control the power you claim I have? Morgan's expression was impossible to read. Then you'll be sent back to Camelot. You'll live as princess. You'll marry whoever Arthur chooses. You'll have comfortable life with no power, no magic, no ability to shape your own fate beyond whatever small freedoms women are granted in kingdoms ruled by men and their gods. And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what you might have been if you'd been strong enough, brave enough, stubborn enough to survive this year and become more than just another royal wife, producing heirs and managing households and slowly disappearing into irrelevance. The words were cruel, but they carried truth that Morgaine recognized instinctively. Truth about what waited for her if she gave up. If she let grief and anger make her weak. If she allowed this place to break her rather than shape her. She thought about her mother who'd been queen but who'd apparently had dreams of being something more. Something powerful. Something that existed outside the narrow roles women were allowed. She thought about becoming just another princess. Just another piece moved around political boards by men who saw her as asset or liability, but never as person with her own will, her own dreams, her own right to determine her fate. And she thought about what Morgaine had offered, painful and difficult as it was. The chance to be more, the chance to have power. The chance to ensure she'd never be helpless again. Never be subject to others' decisions. Never be forced to watch people she loved die while she stood by unable to help. Fine. Her voice was steady, despite the fear churning in her stomach. I'll stay. I'll learn. I'll do what you ask. But not because I want to. Not because I've accepted this. Just because the alternative is worse. Just because being powerless is more terrifying than anything you'll put me through. Just because I won't let you people win by making me give up. Morgaine nodded like this was exactly what she'd expected to hear. Like Morgan's stubborn refusal to break was precisely the response she'd been hoping for. Good. Anger is fuel. Use it. But over time, you'll need to learn to channel it, to control it. To make it serve you rather than driving you. For now, just survive. Just wake up each day and do the next thing. Eventually, it gets easier. Eventually, the grief loosens its grip. Eventually, you find that you've built a life here without meaning to, without choosing it, just by continuing to breathe and move forward. That's all anyone can do. That's all I'm asking. She left then. Left Morgaine alone in her small stone room with her grief and her anger and her new robes. That smelled of herbs and smoke and something green and growing. Morgaine changed into them because refusing would be childish gesture that accomplished nothing. Because choosing her battles mattered more than fighting every fight. Because surviving this year meant learning when to resist and when to adapt. The robes fit perfectly, and wearing them made her feel different. Made her feel like she was putting on a role along with the clothing. Made her feel like Morgaine was slipping away and someone new was beginning to emerge. She looked down at herself and didn't recognize the girl in gray priestess robes. Couldn't see the princess who'd lived in castle and been sung to sleep by queens. That girl was gone, and whoever was taking her place, whoever was being forged in grief and anger and forced education on an impossible island, she would be something else entirely. Something harder, something stranger. Something that would one day be called Morgan le Fay, even though right now she was just a 9-year-old child, trying desperately not to cry, trying desperately not to break, trying desperately to survive the first day of her new life, without letting anyone see how terrified she actually was. The Girl Who Would Be Morgan, Part 3. The learning the days on Avalon had a rhythm that Morgan learned quickly, because routine was survival. Because knowing what was expected meant you could meet those expectations without drawing attention, without giving anyone reason to push harder, or demand more, or decide you weren't worth the effort of training. She woke before dawn when the mists were thickest, and the boundary between worlds felt most permeable. When magic moved easiest, and power flowed with less resistance. She dressed in her gray robes, and walked barefoot across cold stone to the well where she drew water and washed her face and hands. Where she stood for a moment, breathing the pre-dawn air that smelled of apple blossoms and wood smoke, and something indefinable that existed only here, only in this place between possible and impossible. Then she went to the central hall, where all the priestesses gathered for morning meditation. For the silent hour, when they sat together and opened themselves to whatever the goddess might choose to communicate. When they let go of ego and desire and individual will and simply existed as vessels, as channels, as doorways through which something larger might choose to move. Morgan hated it. Hated the silence that left too much room for grief to surge up and overwhelm her. Hated sitting still when her body wanted to move and fight and do anything but be present with pain she couldn't escape. But she did it anyway, because refusing meant being singled out, meant being marked as difficult or weak or unwilling to do the work, meant giving them excuse to send her back to Arthur and the life she'd already decided was worse than anything Avalon could throw at her. So she sat and she breathed, and she tried to still her racing thoughts, even though stillness felt impossible. Even though her mind kept circling back to her mother's face and the moment she'd realized Igraine was truly gone and would never return, would never hold her or comfort her or make the world feel safe again. After meditation came breakfast. Simple fare of bread and cheese and fruit from the sacred orchards. Food that tasted better than it should, that seemed to carry sustenance beyond mere calories. That made Morgan feel more awake and aware and present than ordinary food ever had. Then came lessons, and the lessons were endless, exhausting, demanding in ways that pushed Morgan to limits she hadn't known she had. Nesta taught her the basics of herbalism, the uses of every plant that grew on Avalon, which ones healed and which ones harmed and which ones did both, depending on preparation and dosage and intent. Morgan learned to identify them by sight and smell and touch, learned to harvest them at proper times under proper conditions. Learned to prepare tinctures and salves and teas that carried properties both mundane and magical. She learned that mugwort opened the inner eye, and wormwood created boundaries, and yarrow brought courage, and that combining them in specific ratios with specific words spoken at specific times could create effects that went beyond what any single plant could accomplish alone. She learned that magic wasn't just power summoned from nowhere, but power that existed already in the world, in growing things and stones and water and air. Power that could be channeled and shaped and directed if you knew how to ask, how to petition, how to offer something of yourself in exchange for what you were taking. Another priestess, an older woman named Ceres, with silver hair and hands gnarled by decades of work, taught her the old languages. The words from before Christianity came with its Latin and its insistence that there was only one way to approach the divine. Only one language that God understood, only one path to salvation. Morgan learned the tongue that priestesses spoke when working magic. Words that weren't quite Welsh and weren't quite Latin and weren't quite anything from the mortal world, but that seemed to resonate at frequencies that made reality shiver and bend. She learned that speaking these words required precision, that syllables pronounced slightly wrong could change meaning entirely, could turn healing to harm, could twist intention into something monstrous. She learned that language itself was magic, that naming things gave you power over them, that knowing the true name of something meant you could command it, compel it, make it serve your will whether it wanted to or not. Morgan herself taught the most difficult lessons, the ones about power and control and the discipline required to wield magic without being consumed by it. She taught Morgan to meditate deeper than the morning sessions, to sink into states where her consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of her body, where she could sense the threads of power that connected all living things, where she could feel the pulse of magic moving through the world like blood through veins, like sap through trees, like some vast circulatory system that encompassed everything. She taught her to reach out with awareness rather than hands, to touch those threads gently, to learn their textures and their purposes without pulling on them yet, without trying to manipulate them before she understood what manipulation would cost, what consequences would ripple outward from even small changes to the fabric of reality. And slowly, reluctantly, Morgan began to understand what they'd meant about the gift, about the power that ran in her blood. She'd always been aware of things she shouldn't be aware of, had always known when people were lying or hiding things, had always felt the emotional atmosphere of rooms she entered before anyone spoke. She'd thought everyone could do that, thought it was normal human perception rather than something rare and strange and potentially dangerous. But on Avalon, where magic was acknowledged rather than denied, where perception was trained rather than dismissed, she began to realize that what she'd thought was ordinary was actually her gift manifesting, was actually power leaking out of her untrained and uncontrolled, was actually potential that could be shaped into something extraordinary or something terrible depending on what she did with it, how she learned to channel it, whether she developed the discipline to wield it responsibly. The realization was frightening and exhilarating in equal measure. Frightening because it meant Morgan had been right, meant Morgan really did need this training, really would have hurt people if she'd been left untaught, really was dangerous in ways she hadn't understood, but also exhilarating because it meant she wasn't powerless, wasn't helpless, wasn't just a child subject to adults' whims and decisions. She had something that belonged to her alone, something that couldn't be taken away, something that would give her agency and choice and the ability to shape her own fate rather than simply accepting whatever fate others determined for her. It didn't make her grief less, didn't make her miss her mother any less fiercely, didn't make Avalon feel like home or make her accept her exile as necessary rather than cruel. But it gave her reason to keep going, kept her moving forward through days that sometimes felt impossible. gave her something to focus on besides the hole her mother's death had left in her chest. 3 months into her year on Avalon, Morgaine made her first friend, not Nesta, who was kind, but also clearly assigned to watch her, to report to Morgaine about her progress, to ensure she wasn't causing problems or falling too far behind in her lessons. No, her first real friend came from an unexpected place, from the boundary between Avalon and the mortal world, from the threshold where solid reality gave way to mist and magic. She was walking alone one evening, restless after hours of meditation that had left her mind to open and raw, when she saw something moving in the water near the shore. At first she thought it was a fish, or perhaps a seal that had somehow found its way through the mists. But then it surfaced, and she saw a face that was almost human, but not quite. Features too perfect and symmetrical, eyes too large and too blue. Hair the color of deep water flowing around her like it was part of her, rather than just growing from her scalp. A water spirit. Morgaine had been taught about them in her lessons, had learned that they existed in the spaces between worlds, that they were neither mortal nor fully of the spirit realm, but something in between, something liminal and strange and potentially dangerous if approached incorrectly. She should have walked away, should have followed the rules about not interacting with spirits without supervision, without proper preparation, without understanding what you were dealing with and what it might want in exchange for whatever interaction you sought. But Morgaine was tired of rules, tired of being told what to do and how to be and what was proper behavior for a 9-year-old child learning to be priestess. So instead of walking away, she walked closer, stood at the water's edge, and spoke. "Hello, I'm Morgaine. What are you?" The water spirit tilted her head, curious, and when she spoke, her voice sounded like running water over stones, like music played on instruments that existed only in dreams. "I am Vivian. I am the water and the boundary and the space between. What are you? Child who speaks to me when you should not, who looks at me without fear when most mortals flee." Morgaine considered the question seriously, considered what she was beyond name and age, and the roles others tried to force her into. "I'm someone who lost everything and is trying to learn to be something new. I'm someone who doesn't fit anywhere but is trying to survive anyway. I'm someone who's tired of being afraid and being small and being told what I should want, instead of what I actually want." Vivian smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible. The kind of smile that suggested she understood far more than any human could, that saw past surface to the heart of things. "You are like me then. Neither one thing nor another. Neither mortal nor magic, but something caught between. Come, walk with me along the shore. Tell me about your world and I will tell you about mine. We can be friends who belong nowhere together." And so began the strangest friendship Morgaine had ever known. She met Vivian most evenings when lessons were done, and the other priestesses were occupied with their own work and practices. They walked along the shore or sat on rocks jutting into the water, and they talked about everything and nothing. Vivian told her about the spirit realm, about how time moved differently there, about how beings like her experienced reality as fluid and mutable, rather than fixed and solid, about how mortals seemed both fascinating and tragic because they were so limited, so trapped in linear time and singular perspectives, so unable to see the vast possibilities that existed beyond their narrow perceptions. Morgaine told her about the mortal world, about kingdoms and kings and the politics that shaped human lives, about her mother's death and her exile to Avalon and the anger she carried that never quite diminished, no matter how much she learned or how much time passed. Vivian listened without judgment, without trying to fix things or offer platitudes or tell Morgaine she should feel differently than she did. She just listened and occasionally offered observations that suggested she saw patterns Morgaine hadn't noticed. Connections between things that seemed separate, possibilities Morgaine hadn't considered. And slowly, without meaning to, Morgaine began to feel less alone. Began to feel like someone saw her not as student or project or burden, but as person. As complicated and hurt and angry as she actually was, rather than as who everyone else needed her to become. She didn't tell Morgaine about Vivian because she knew her aunt would disapprove, would say it was dangerous to interact with spirits without supervision, would probably forbid the friendship or at least try to control it. To make it part of Morgaine's training rather than letting it be the one thing that belonged to her alone. The one relationship that existed outside the structure and rules and expectations that governed everything else about her life on Avalon. But secrets are hard to keep in places where magic runs strong, where people trained in the old ways can sense when something has shifted, when patterns have changed, when their students are hiding things from them. Morgaine found out, not through catching Morgaine in the act, but through simply sensing the change in her. Through recognizing that something had opened in her niece that had been closed. That Morgaine was learning lessons that weren't part of the formal curriculum. That some influence was at work that Morgaine hadn't sanctioned or approved. She confronted Morgaine one morning after meditation, pulled her aside with grip that was gentle but implacable. You've been spending time with something from the boundary. I can smell the water on you. Can sense the residue of spirit magic clinging to your aura. What have you been doing? Who have you been seeing? Morgaine's first instinct was to lie, to deny, to protect Vivian and the friendship that had become precious to her in ways she hadn't expected. But she'd also been taught that lying to your teachers was among the worst failures a student could commit. That priestesses valued truth even when truth was difficult or uncomfortable, or revealed things you wanted to hide. So she told Morgaine everything. Told her about Vivian and their walks and their conversations and the way Morgaine felt less alone when she was with her strange friend who understood what it meant to exist between worlds, to belong nowhere completely. She braced for anger, for punishment, for Morgaine to forbid the friendship and bind Morgaine with wards that would keep her from the shore and from Vivian. But Morgaine's expression was complicated, mixing concern and something that looked almost like understanding. Water spirits are dangerous, Morgaine. They don't think like mortals. They don't value human life the way we do. They're beautiful and fascinating, and they can seem like friends, but they're not safe. They can drown you, or enchant you, or trap you in the boundary, where you'll slowly lose your humanity and become something like them, something that can never return to the mortal world. Morgaine lifted her chin stubbornly. Vivian is my friend. She's the only person here who sees me as me, instead of as someone to be shaped and trained, and turned into what you all want me to be. She listens without judging. She doesn't try to fix me, or tell me I should feel differently. She just lets me be angry and sad and lost, and she doesn't make me feel guilty about it. I won't stop seeing her. I don't care if you forbid it. I'll find a way. Morgaine was quiet for a long moment, studying Morgaine with those gray eyes that saw too much, that understood more than Morgaine wanted her to understand. Then she sighed. I won't forbid it. Not yet. But I will set conditions. You don't go into the water with her. You don't let her touch you. You don't eat anything she offers you. You don't promise her anything. And you tell me if she asks you to do anything, to go anywhere, to change anything about yourself. Water spirits are tricksters. They don't mean harm usually, but they operate by different rules, and what seems like innocent Friendship to you might be them slowly binding you to the boundary, slowly making you less human until you can't return home even if you want to. The warning should have frightened Morgaine, but instead it made her defensive, made her want to protect Vivian from Morgane's suspicion, made her insist that her friend wasn't dangerous or tricky or trying to trap her. But she also knew Morgaine wasn't lying, wasn't exaggerating for effect or trying to control her unnecessarily. Her aunt's concern was genuine, even if Morgaine didn't want to acknowledge it. Even if accepting that concern meant accepting that maybe her one real friendship on Avalon came with risks she hadn't fully considered. She agreed to Morgaine's conditions because refusing would mean losing permission entirely, would mean being watched constantly, would mean guards put on her that she couldn't circumvent. And she told herself that she'd be careful, that she'd follow the rules, that she wouldn't let her friendship with Vivian become something that consumed her or changed her or made her less than fully human. But 6 months into her year on Avalon, when spring came and the orchard burst into bloom and magic flowed thick and heady through everything, Morgaine broke her promise, not deliberately, not with intention to disobey. Just in a moment when Vivian surfaced looking more beautiful than ever, when the spirit's hand reached out of the water, offering something that glowed like captured starlight. When Morgaine's curiosity overcame her caution, and she reached out to take what was offered. Her fingers touched Vivian's, and the sensation was like nothing she'd ever experienced. Cold that burned. Connection that expanded her awareness beyond her body. Understanding that flooded through her, showing her things she'd never seen, perspectives she'd never held, possibilities she'd never imagined. For a moment that stretched and blurred, she was both herself and Vivian, was both human and spirit, was both solid flesh and fluid water, was both bounded by time and free of it. She saw the world from Vivian's perspective, and it was vast and strange and beautiful and terrifying, in ways that made her mortal life seem small and gray and limited beyond bearing. Then Morgaine's hands were on her shoulders, pulling her back, breaking the contact, severing the connection that had been forming. Morgaine gasped and fell backward onto solid ground, her head spinning, her perception sliding sickeningly between human and something else, struggling to fit back into the boundaries of her own skin after experiencing what it was like to be without boundaries, to be fluid and free and unbounded by flesh. Morgaine held her while she shook, while she cried without quite knowing why she was crying, while something in her that had touched infinity tried to reconcile with being finite again, with being small, with being trapped in a single body moving through a single timeline in a single direction. Vivian had disappeared into the depths, either frightened by Morgaine's intervention or simply moving on to other interests. Now that the moment had passed, now that Morgaine had proven herself too fragile for true connection, too mortal for the kind of friendship Vivian had been offering. "What did you do?" Morgaine's voice was harsh with fear rather than anger, with the terror of someone who'd almost lost something precious and was still shaking from how close it had been. "I told you not to touch her. I told you the rules. I gave you freedom to have this friendship, because I understood you needed someone who wasn't teacher or jailer or family. Someone who could just be companion. And you broke the one boundary I set. You touched her. You let her pull you toward the boundary. Do you understand how close you just came to losing yourself? To becoming something that couldn't return home? To being trapped forever in that space between worlds?" Morgaine couldn't speak, couldn't form words, could only shake her head while tears streamed down her face and her perception slowly settled back into something approaching normal, something approaching human, something that recognized itself as Morgaine, rather than as infinite and formless awareness. Morgaine carried her back to her room, a 9-year-old child, light enough that even a woman who rarely showed physical strength could lift her, and laid her on her narrow bed and sat beside her while she slowly came back to herself. When Morgaine could finally speak, her voice was hoarse. I felt everything. I was everything. I could see the whole world from outside it. I could feel how small my problems are, how temporary everything is, how nothing I care about really matters in the vast scope of existence. And now I'm back in this tiny body in this tiny life, and it all feels so heavy and constricted and wrong. How do I fit back into being human after feeling what it's like to be more than human? Morgaine's expression was sad but understanding. You learn. The same way everyone learns after touching power that's too large for them to hold. You remember that human limitations aren't weaknesses. They're what make meaning possible. Infinite consciousness doesn't feel joy or sorrow, doesn't love or grieve, doesn't create or destroy, just exists in vast indifferent awareness. But humans, bounded and temporary as we are, we can feel intensely, love fiercely, create meaning from nothing. That's not limitation. That's gift. Morgaine wanted to argue, but exhaustion was claiming her, pulling her towards sleep she desperately needed. Before she slipped under, she managed one more question. Is Vivian gone? Did you scare her away? Did I lose my friend? Morgaine was quiet for a moment, then spoke gently. Water spirits don't form friendships the way humans do. They don't feel attachment or loss. She experienced you as interesting phenomenon, enjoyed the connection while it lasted, and has now moved on to other experiences. She wasn't your friend, Morgaine. Not in the way you needed her to be. She was teacher of a different kind, showing you what it feels like to touch the boundary, to sense what lies beyond mortal limitations. But she was never going to stay. That's not her nature. Her nature is to flow and change and be always moving toward the next experience. You can't hold water in your hands, no matter how tightly you grasp it. The loss hit Morgaine harder than she'd expected, harder than it should have given what Morgaine was saying, harder than seemed rational for a friendship that had lasted only 3 months and had apparently been one-sided in ways Morgaine hadn't understood. But it wasn't really about Vivian. It was about losing the one thing on Avalon that had felt like hers. The one relationship that hadn't been assigned or supervised or made part of her training. It was about loneliness crashing back down after she'd briefly felt less alone. It was about realizing that even her friendship, her one source of comfort, had been teaching tool rather than genuine connection, had been another lesson rather than reprieve from lessons. She cried herself to sleep that night, and Morgaine stayed with her, silent presence that didn't try to comfort or fix but just remained, keeping watch the way guardians do, the way adults do when children are hurting and there's nothing to be done except witness the pain and wait for it to pass. The Girl Who Would Be Morgaine, Part 4. The Becoming Narration Ready Script, each section approximately 4,500 characters. The last 3 months of Morgaine's year on Avalon were different from the first 9. Something had shifted in her after touching Vivian, after experiencing what lay beyond human boundaries and then being forced back into human limitations. She was quieter now, more focused, less openly angry. The grief was still there, but it had transformed into something else, something harder and colder, something that drove her to excel at her lessons not because she wanted to please her teachers but because power was the only thing she'd found that couldn't be taken from her, that belonged to her regardless of who lived or died, that gave her control over at least some aspects of her existence. She threw herself into learning with intensity that worried Morgaine even as it pleased her. With dedication that seemed less like enthusiasm and more like desperation. Like drowning person grasping for anything that might keep her afloat. She mastered herb lore faster than any student Ceres had taught in decades, learning not just what plants did but why they did it, how their properties interacted, how combinations could be layered to create effects that went far beyond simple addition of individual powers. She learned to hear the plants themselves, to sense what they needed and what they offered, to form relationships with them that allowed her to coax more potency from even common herbs than other priestesses achieved. She could walk through the gardens and know without touching which plants were ready for harvest, which needed tending, which were sick or stressed or dying, as if she'd developed sensitivity that let her feel their life force, their essential nature, their state of being without any external signs to guide her. Ceres called it gift, but Morgaine knew it was more like opening herself to pain, like becoming so porous and receptive that everything affected her, like dismantling the boundaries that protected her from feeling too much so she could learn more, but at the cost of being constantly overwhelmed by sensation and emotion and awareness. Her magical training advanced even faster. Morgaine taught her to reach out with her consciousness and touch the threads of power that connected all things, to sense where they were weak or strong, to understand how they could be pulled or twisted or woven into new configurations. But where most students needed years to even perceive those threads clearly, Morgaine could see them from the start, could feel them humming beneath everything like electricity waiting to be channeled, like potential waiting to be directed toward purpose. She learned to pull gently, to test her strength without forcing, to request rather than demand, to work with the flow of magic rather than trying to bend it to her will through force alone. But she also learned that she had more natural power than anyone had expected. That when she pulled on those threads, they responded with eagerness that bordered on hunger. That magic wanted to move through her in ways it didn't move through other priestesses. Wanted to shape itself according to her will. Wanted to serve her in ways that should have taken decades of training to achieve. Morgaine watched this development with pride and concern mixed together, with recognition that she'd been right about Morgaine's potential, and fear about what that potential might become. With understanding that power this raw and strong would either make Morgaine remarkable or destroy her entirely. That there was no middle ground for someone who carried this much natural ability. She pushed Morgaine harder than she pushed any other student, demanded perfection rather than adequacy, set standards that were almost impossible to meet, and then raised them higher when Morgaine met them anyway. She taught her discipline through repetition and failure, and the grinding work of doing the same exercise 1,000 times until it became second nature, until Morgaine could perform complex magic while barely conscious, while exhausted, while in pain, while distracted, until magical response became as automatic as breathing, as reflexive as flinching from fire. And Morgaine endured it all because she'd decided endurance was her only option. Because giving up meant going back to Camelot and being powerless and small. Because the only way through was forward, and the only way forward was to become stronger, harder, more capable than anyone expected. To prove herself valuable enough that they'd keep teaching her, that Morgaine would let her stay beyond the year, that she'd never have to return to the ordinary world, where she'd be just another royal woman. With no agency and no ability to shape her fate. 8 months into her year, Morgaine decided Morgaine was ready for her first real test, for the moment when she'd have to use everything she'd learned under pressure, when failure would have actual consequences rather than just requiring her to try again. She took Morgaine to a village in the mortal world, a place where sickness had struck, where fever raged through families and healers couldn't stop it, where people were dying and didn't know why. Your task is to identify what's causing this, to determine whether it's natural sickness, or curse, or contaminated water, or some other source, and then to fix it if you can. I won't help you, won't guide you, won't intervene even if you're failing. This is your test. Prove you've learned enough to use your knowledge and power for something beyond exercises and demonstrations. Prove you can help people rather than just studying in isolation. Prove you're becoming priestess, rather than just playing at being one. Morgan walked through the village with senses open, reaching out with awareness to feel the shape of what was wrong, to sense whether this was natural illness or something more complicated. She visited the sick in their homes, touched their foreheads to read their fever, looked at the flush of their cheeks and the whites of their eyes and listened to their breathing. She questioned families about when the illness started, about what they'd eaten and drunk, about where they'd been and what they'd done in the days before the fever struck. And slowly, piece by piece, she assembled understanding. This wasn't curse, wasn't contaminated well, was natural illness, but spread by something specific. By a traveling merchant who'd sold cloth infected with fever from distant lands, cloth that families had brought into their homes and handled and slept under without realizing they were exposing themselves to sickness that their bodies had no defenses against. The solution was both simple and difficult. Burn the cloth. Isolate the sick until the fever passed. Treat symptoms with herbs that would reduce fever and ease breathing and help their bodies fight the infection. Give them time and care and help them survive until their own immune systems could defeat what they'd been exposed to. She worked for 3 days straight, barely sleeping, moving from house to house, administering tinctures and teas, showing families how to tend their sick, teaching them which signs meant someone was recovering and which meant they were getting worse. She used magic sparingly, carefully, only when absolutely necessary to strengthen someone who was failing, to ease suffering that was unbearable, to help bodies heal faster than they could heal alone. And it worked. People who would have died survived. The illness stopped spreading. Within a week, the worst had passed, and families were thanking her with tears and gifts they couldn't afford. With gratitude that made Morgan uncomfortable because she hadn't done it for thanks, hadn't done it out of kindness or charity, had done it because Morgan had assigned it as test, and failing meant not being allowed to continue training. But seeing the results, seeing children who would have died playing again, seeing mothers who would have buried husbands, kissing them with relief, seeing families whole who would have been broken by loss. Something in Morgan's chest loosened slightly. Something that had been clenched tight since her mother died opened just enough to let in the possibility that maybe power could be used for something besides protecting herself. That maybe strength could be channeled toward helping others. That maybe there was meaning to be found in easing suffering even if you couldn't eliminate it entirely. Morgan said nothing as they walked back toward Avalon, said nothing as they crossed the boundary and the mists closed around them, said nothing until they were standing in the orchard where apple blossoms drifted like snow and magic pulsed gentle and steady through earth and air. Then she turned to Morgan, and there was something in her expression that looked almost like affection, almost like pride, almost like recognition that her student had crossed some threshold she couldn't quite name. You did well, better than I expected. You identified the problem accurately, applied your knowledge appropriately, used magic sparingly and wisely, rather than relying on it as crutch. You helped people who needed help, and you didn't make it about yourself, didn't demand recognition or payment or even gratitude. You just did the work that needed doing. That's what it means to be priestess. Not performing miracles that make people worship you. Just applying knowledge and power to solve problems that would otherwise go unsolved. Morgaine accepted the praise without pleasure. Accepted it as assessment rather than compliment, as data point rather than validation. How much longer until my year is finished? Morgaine smiled slightly. 2 months. And then the choice comes. Do you return to Camelot as your brother expects? Or do you stay here and continue training? Continue becoming what you're clearly meant to be? Morgaine didn't have to think about the answer. She'd known for months what she would choose, what she had to choose, what the only possible path forward looked like. I stay. I keep learning. I become powerful enough that no one can ever make me helpless again. That no one can ever take people I love without me being able to fight back. That no one can ever hurt me without regretting it. That's all I want. Just enough power to protect myself and the people I care about. Just enough strength to ensure I'm never victim again. Morgaine's expression shifted, became serious, became something closer to sad. That's what everyone says when they start down this path. Just enough power for protection. Just enough strength for safety. But power has gravity. The more you have, the more you want. The stronger you become, the more threats you perceive. The better you get at protecting yourself, the more isolated you become because you start seeing everyone as potential enemy, potential betrayer, potential threat to guard against. That's the price no one tells you about when you're beginning. That's the cost that doesn't show up until years later when you realize you've spent so long building walls and gathering weapons that you've forgotten how to lower them, how to be vulnerable, how to let people close enough to actually matter. Morgaine heard the warning, but dismissed it because she was 9 years old, and pain was immediate while consequence was theoretical. Because loss was real, while future isolation seemed like fair trade for present security. Because she couldn't imagine anything worse than the helplessness she'd felt watching her mother die, than the powerlessness she'd experienced being sent to Avalon against her will, than the vulnerability of being child subject to adults' choices and whims and political calculations. I'll risk it. I'll take that chance. Because being alone and powerful is better than being surrounded by people but helpless to protect them. Better than loving people and watching them die while you stand by unable to help. Better than trusting people to look out for your interests when they'll always prioritize their own. At least if I'm powerful, I get to choose my own fate. At least if I'm strong, I don't have to rely on anyone else's goodwill or mercy or willingness to help. The words were adamant, certain, spoken with the conviction of someone who thought they understood the trade they were making, who thought they'd calculated the costs and found them acceptable. Morgaine didn't argue, didn't try to change Morgaine's mind, just nodded like she'd expected exactly this response. Like she'd heard it before from herself years ago. Like she recognized the beginning of a journey she'd taken and knew all the places it led, all the prices it demanded, all the ways it would shape Morgaine into someone who would one day be called Morgan le Fay. Sorceress, legend, woman of power, who would inspire fear and awe in equal measure. She took Morgaine's hand. The gesture surprisingly gentle, surprisingly maternal for someone who usually maintained careful distance. Then stay. Learn. Become what you're meant to become. Just remember somewhere beneath the power and the walls and the determination never to be vulnerable again. Remember that you were once Morgaine, 9 years old and grieving, who just wanted her mother and couldn't have her. Don't lose that girl entirely. She's the part of you that makes the power worth having. that gives you reason to protect beyond just self-preservation, that remembers what it feels like to be human and hurt and dependent on others' kindness. The final 2 months passed quickly, blurred together by intensive study and advanced lessons, by Morgan pushing Morgan harder than ever, as if trying to cram years of knowledge into weeks, as if recognizing that her student would never have this kind of focused training time again, once the formal year ended and other responsibilities intruded. Morgan learned ritual magic, the complex ceremonies that required precise timing and exact words and specific offerings to powers that didn't care about human needs, but might be persuaded to help if asked correctly. She learned scrying, looking into water or crystal or fire to see what was happening elsewhere. What might happen in future? What patterns were forming that would affect events yet to unfold? She learned wards, the protective spells that could keep unwanted things out of spaces you wanted to protect, that could alert you to danger, that could make you invisible or inaudible or simply uninteresting to anyone looking for you. And she learned one more thing, the lesson Morgan hadn't planned to teach yet, but that circumstances demanded. She learned that power attracted attention, that being strong made you visible to things that otherwise wouldn't notice you, that there were beings in the spaces between worlds who watched for humans with enough magic to be interesting, to be useful, to be potential allies or enemies or tools. She felt them sometimes at the edge of awareness, felt a tension that wasn't human or mortal, felt interest that made her skin prickle with warning and her instincts scream at her to hide, to diminish herself, to be small and unremarkable and beneath notice. Morgan taught her how to shield, how to make herself less visible magically even while growing stronger, how to appear ordinary to casual observation while hiding reserves of power that would surprise anyone who attacked, thinking her vulnerable. On the last day of her year on Avalon, Morgan stood in the orchard where she'd arrived 12 months earlier, stood wearing the gray robes that had become comfortable and familiar, stood looking at the mists that separated this impossible island from the mortal world she'd left behind. She'd changed. She knew she'd changed. Could feel it in how she perceived reality now, in how magic responded to her will, in how she carried herself with confidence that bordered on arrogance, in how she looked at the world with eyes that saw more than ordinary people saw, that perceived patterns and possibilities and power flowing through everything. She was still Morgan, still carried her mother's death like stone in her chest, still felt the anger that had driven her through this year. But she was also becoming something else, someone else, the person who would one day be legend, who would stand beside and against Arthur, who would shape events through power and wisdom and the determination never to be helpless again. Morgan found her there as the sunset, found her standing at the boundary between staying and leaving, found her holding the choice that would determine everything that came after. Arthur sent word. He expects you tomorrow. Expects you to return to Camelot. Expects his sister back so he can arrange her future, determine her education, eventually marry her to whoever serves his political needs best. Will you go, or will you stay? Morgan didn't hesitate, didn't doubt, didn't question the choice she'd known she'd make since the moment she'd understood what power meant, what strength offered, what the alternative to this life would cost her. I stay, I keep learning. I become priestess and sorceress, and whatever else I need to be to ensure I'm never powerless again. Arthur will have to accept that his sister chose a different path, that she belongs to Avalon now, that she's mine to train, mine to shape, mine to make into what she needs to be. Morgan smiled, and there was satisfaction in it, triumph. recognition that she'd succeeded in binding Morgan to this path, in ensuring that one more generation would carry the power forward, would preserve the old ways, would stand against the tide of Christianity and progress, and the forces that sought to erase magic from the world. Welcome home then. Welcome to the life you've chosen. Welcome to the power that will define you, and the isolation that will sustain you, and the strength that will both save and damn you. Welcome to being Morgan le Fay, even though you don't yet know that's who you're becoming. Don't yet understand all the prices you'll pay. Don't yet see where this path leads. Welcome. And may you find whatever it is you're looking for, even though I suspect what you find won't be what you expected, won't be comfort or safety or peace, will just be more power and more responsibility, and more reasons to build walls higher. Until you forget there was ever a time when you were just a girl who wanted her mother. The mists closed around them, and Avalon settled into its ancient rhythms, accepting one more priestess into its fold, absorbing one more student into its teachings, shaping one more legend from raw material of grief and anger and desperate need for control. And Morgan stood at the center of it, 9 years old and already harder than stone, already shaped by loss into someone who would never quite heal, never quite soften, never quite remember how to be vulnerable enough for love that wasn't also weapon, for connection that wasn't also strategy, for anything that didn't serve the primary goal of never being helpless again. She'd chosen this. She'd stay. And in staying, she'd become the woman the world would remember, would fear, would name as both savior and destroyer, depending on which story you believed, which side you stood on, which version of truth you found most compelling. But that was future. That was legend. That was Morgan le Fay. For now she was still just Morgan, standing in the orchard, watching the sunset, holding the choice she'd made and wondering if someday she'd look back and see this as the moment everything began, or as the moment everything was lost. The Girl Who Would Be Morgan, Part 1. The Arrival Narration Ready Script, each section approximately 4,500 characters. Come close and let me tell you about the girl who would become legend. About the child who arrived at Avalon wild with grief and left as Morgan le Fay. About the year that shaped a sorceress and broke a little girl's heart in ways that never fully healed. This is a story about before. About the time when Morgan was just Morgan, 9 years old and newly orphaned. About the first year on the Sacred Isle when she learned magic and made her first friend, and discovered that power always comes with prices you don't expect to pay. Her mother died on a gray morning in autumn, when the leaves were turning, and the world smelled of smoke and ending. Things a grain queen, mother, gone in the night from a fever that came fast and burned through her like wildfire, leaving nothing but a cooling body and a daughter who couldn't quite believe that the woman who'd sung her to sleep every night was simply not there anymore, would never be there again. Had left without warning or goodbye, or any chance for Morgan to say the things children always think they'll have time to say later. The castle filled with mourning and ritual, with priests chanting Latin, and servants weeping, and courtiers wearing black, and speaking in hushed voices about God's will and heaven's gain, and all the comfortable lies adults tell themselves when death comes too soon and makes no sense. But Morgan didn't weep, couldn't weep. Just stood frozen and silent beside her mother's body, staring at the face that looked like her mother but wasn't. That lacked the essential spark that made Morgaine herself, that was just empty shell wearing familiar features. Her half-brother Arthur came to the funeral. The boy king, who was barely older than a child himself, wearing his crown like it weighed more than he could bear, surrounded by advisors and guards, and the weight of a kingdom that needed him to be stronger and wiser than any 15-year-old should have to be. He knelt beside Morgaine and tried to offer comfort, tried to be the big brother despite the years they'd spent apart, despite barely knowing each other. "You'll come to Camelot. You'll live with me. I'll take care of you. You're my sister. Your family." His voice was kind, but Morgaine heard the uncertainty in it. Heard that he didn't know what to do with a grieving 9-year-old any more than she knew what to do with a brother who was also a king, who was also a stranger, who was also drowning in his own responsibilities and couldn't possibly have room for her pain on top of everything else he carried. But someone else spoke before Morgaine could respond, before Arthur's offer could become reality. A woman's voice, clear and commanding, coming from the back of the hall where shadows gathered thick. "The girl comes to Avalon. Her mother wished it. I will train her in the ways Igraine would have taught her if she'd lived. In the old knowledge, in the magic that runs in our bloodline. She will be priestess as her mother would have been before crown and marriage changed her path." Arthur turned and his face went carefully neutral. The expression Morgaine would learn to recognize as the one he wore when dealing with something that made him uncomfortable, but that he couldn't simply refuse or dismiss. Morgan le Fay. The woman stepped into the light, and Morgaine saw her clearly for the first time. Not old, but not young either, with dark hair and gray eyes and presence that filled the room despite her simple robes. With power that pressed against the walls like something alive and aware, and barely contained. She was beautiful in a way that made Morgaine think of winter storms and deep forests and things that were dangerous and wild and completely undomesticated. Arthur's voice was careful, diplomatic, the voice of someone walking through a conversation full of traps. "Morgaine is my sister. She should be raised at court, given education suitable for her station, prepared for the life she lead as princess of the realm." Morgaine's smile was sharp. "Igraine asked me to take the girl if anything happened to her. Asked me years ago, when Morgaine was born, and showed signs of the gift, of the power that runs through our blood. Your mother knew what the child was, what she could become, knew that Camelot with its priests and politics was no place for someone whose magic would only grow stronger with age. She made me promise, and I keep my promises, Arthur, even when they're inconvenient, even when they complicate your plans for tidy kingdoms and unified rule." The tension in the room was thick enough to taste a clash of wills between king and sorceress playing out in careful words and careful silences. Morgaine watched them and felt like she was prize being disputed, like object rather than person. Like her own feelings and desires mattered less than whatever power struggle was happening between these two people, who both claimed to want what was best for her but who clearly wanted very different things. Arthur's jaw tightened. "She's 9 years old. She's grieving. This isn't the time to make decisions about her future. She needs stability, family, comfort." Morgaine's voice softened slightly, but lost none of its certainty. "She needs magic. She needs training. She needs to learn what she is before the power inside her grows beyond her control and destroys her. I've seen it happen, Arthur. Seen children with the gift tear themselves apart because no one taught them how to channel it, how to shape it, how to make it serve them rather than consuming them. Do you want that for your sister? Do you want her to wake one night with her room on fire because her nightmares manifested? Do you want her to accidentally hurt people she loves because she doesn't understand the power moving through her blood?" Morgaine's hands clenched into fists because she didn't understand what they were talking about. Didn't know what gift or power or magic they meant. Didn't know why her mother had apparently planned to send her away, had kept secrets, had made arrangements for a future Morgan hadn't known existed. She wanted to scream at both of them, wanted to demand they stop talking about her like she wasn't there, wanted to tell them she didn't want Camelot or Avalon, didn't want training or stability, just wanted her mother back, wanted to wake up and discover this was nightmare rather than reality, wanted everything to go back to how it was before, fever and death and strangers arguing over her future. But her voice wouldn't work, wouldn't cooperate, stayed locked in her throat along with the tears that wouldn't fall, along with the grief that felt too large to express, along with everything she wanted to say but couldn't. Arthur looked at Morgan and she saw something like pain cross his face, saw him recognize her silence as the scream it was, saw him understand he was losing this argument not because Morgan was right, but because he couldn't give Morgan what she needed, couldn't be family and king simultaneously, couldn't offer her the attention and care she deserved when he had a kingdom to hold, together and enemies to manage and responsibilities that never stopped demanding his attention. 1 year, his voice was firm, decisive, the voice of someone making a ruling rather than a request. Morgan goes to Avalon for 1 year. If she thrives there, if she wants to stay, if she truly has this gift you claim, then she continues her training. But if she's unhappy, if she wants to come home, if Avalon isn't right for her, she comes to Camelot and I'll see she's raised properly and given every advantage. 1 year. Morgan considered this, head tilted slightly, eyes calculating something Morgan couldn't read. 1 year. Agreed. But when the year is done and she chooses to stay, because she will choose it, Arthur, you don't interfere. You don't try to reclaim her. You let her become what she's meant to be. The agreement was sealed with looks rather than words, with the weight of magic and authority pressing against each other until they found equilibrium, until both sides accepted terms they didn't love but could live with. And Morgan stood silent through all of it, stood frozen and furious and grieving, stood being decided for rather than deciding, stood learning the first lesson of power, which was that adults would always claim to know what was best, while actually serving their own interests, their own needs, their own desire to control and shape and determine outcomes. Arthur left shortly after, taking his court and his guards and his heavy crown with him, leaving Morgan with a kiss to the forehead and a promise that if she needed him, he would come, that she was his sister, always regardless of where she lived or who trained her. The promise was meant to comfort but felt hollow, felt like something said because it should be said, rather than because it meant anything substantial or real. Morgan waited until everyone else had left, until it was just the two of them in the hall that smelled of incense and grief, until Morgan's silent rage had nowhere to hide. You're angry. Good anger is useful. Anger means you're alive, you're feeling, you're not giving up. Hold on to that, channel it, let it fuel you rather than consuming you. But Morgan's voice, when it finally worked, came out as hiss rather than words, came out as all the fury she'd been holding back. I don't want to go with you. I don't want Avalon. I don't want magic or training or any of it. I just want my mother. I want to go back to yesterday. I want this to not be real. Morgan's expression didn't soften, didn't offer false comfort or empty reassurance. I know. But yesterday is gone and your mother is dead, and what you want doesn't change what is. You can spend your life wishing things were different, or you can accept what's real and learn to shape it, to work with it, to make it serve you. The world is cruel and unfair, and it doesn't care about a 9-year-old's grief. But magic, power, knowledge, those things give you tools to fight back, to protect yourself, to ensure you're never helpless again. Morgan wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her. the days of not sleeping and not eating and not crying finally demanding their price. She swayed slightly, and Morgan caught her elbow, steadied her with surprising gentleness. "Come, you'll sleep tonight in your mother's chambers. Tomorrow, we leave for Avalon. Tomorrow your new life begins, whether you want it or not." She led Morgan up the stairs to the rooms that had been Morgan's, helped her into bed still wearing her black dress because neither of them had energy for anything more complicated. Morgan sat beside the bed like a guard or a warden, or perhaps something closer to comfort than Morgan wanted to admit. "Your mother loved you. Whatever else you think, whatever anger you carry, know that. She loved you enough to see what you'd need, to make arrangements for your future, to ensure you'd be trained by someone who understood the gift rather than feared it. That's love. Imperfect, complicated, sometimes looking like abandonment when it's actually protection, but love nonetheless." Morgan turned her face to the wall, refusing to acknowledge the words even though they settled into her chest like stones, heavy and cold and impossible to ignore. She closed her eyes and tried to will herself into sleep, into oblivion, into anything that wasn't this moment, this grief, this future she didn't want rushing toward her like a wave she couldn't escape. Behind her closed lids, she saw her mother's face, heard her voice singing lullabies, felt the gentle hands that had soothed childhood fears and healed childhood hurts, and she made a silent promise to the darkness, to the grief, to herself. She would go to Avalon because she had no choice. She would learn what they tried to teach her, because refusing would give them satisfaction she wouldn't grant. But she wouldn't forgive, wouldn't accept, wouldn't let them pretend this was anything but kidnapping dressed up as education, abandonment dressed up as protection, loss dressed up as opportunity. She would survive this year, and then she would leave, and she would never, ever let anyone have power over her life again. It was the promise of a grieving child who didn't understand that some promises are impossible to keep, that some paths can't be walked backward once you've started down them, that becoming Morgan le Fay meant leaving Morgan behind in ways she couldn't yet imagine, couldn't yet comprehend, couldn't yet see coming until it was far too late to change course.